Alone in the Dark has always been an inconsistent franchise, and with the remake of the original game coming, I decided to replay all of them, with this video talking about the entry in the series that I always found easiest to revisit, The New Nightmare. It was a reboot of the series that, unlike the original trilogy or the deeply flawed but highly ambitious 2008 game that were setting their own rules and mechanics, pulled a lot of direct influences from Resident Evil and tried to create its own identity inside that formula, which in many ways it did successfully, creating a familiar but also slightly novel classic survival horror experience. For this revisit, I've decided to play the game in two versions. The PC version is the one that people can most easily get from GOG nowadays, and the PS1 version that I've played the most back in the day that I've recorded from DuckStation, running the game at its native resolution. So don't worry if you see big jump in visual quality, it's just different versions of the game. A lot of the ideas in this game almost seem like the team at Darkworks trying to one-up Resident Evil 2, and one of the best things about The New Nightmare is the fact that the two playable characters have genuinely unique campaigns, something that RE2 did not do in the original or the 2019 version. While the characters start and end the game in the same location, they solve completely independent puzzles, go through their own unique story beats, and have several completely exclusive locations to themselves, so to experience the full story, you do have to play the game twice. In another one-up, just like Leon and Claire, Edward and Eileen have a radio, but it can be used at almost any point. Sometimes it's a prompt for story conversations, and sometimes it works as a surprisingly good built-in hint system, and the banter between characters is really enjoyable. Despite using pre-rendered backgrounds, the game manages to also use the light and shadows in a really cool way, where light from your flashlight is used in several puzzles, and one type of enemies can be held back by just freely pointing the light at them. This was years before Obscure and later Alan Wake, which made flashlight into a proper puzzle and combat tool, and it still looks and feels really cool. The overall mood and lore of the game is also very unique, mixing the Lovecraftian ideas with a more modern scientific approach and having a strange combination of magic and technology, helped not just by the visuals and writing but also by a really unique soundtrack that is fully dynamic and very memorable. The game does go overboard with its lore and storytelling at times, however, as it gives you a 40-page document to read that you must read through as they contain hints for puzzle solutions somewhere inside. And puzzles themselves range from being pretty fun to being very odd and poorly explained. And unfortunately, in worst cases, the radio hint system doesn't help you either. There are a lot of odd design choices too, like the need to fully stop before you can open the door, or strange delay before you can step backwards, odd choice in how map shows things, or the fact that you have to use all items, including door keys, from within the inventory, which is rarely a puzzle and feels like a pointless extra step. The combat is also of varying quality. Some rooms and enemy types work well, some are absolutely horrendous. Something that didn't happen often with high-profile classic survival horror titles of the era is that The New Nightmare is shockingly buggy. There are spots where you can go out of bounds rather easily, some boss fights can break and become unfinishable. There's a spot where in all versions of the game you pick up an item from within a locked container that was clearly supposed to be open first. Things almost completely fall apart by the end, as the design behind the final parts of the game for both characters, and especially bosses, looks clearly unfinished. You get respawning enemies, supposedly balanced by near-infinite ammo and healing, a cool-looking but design-wise pointless series of rooms, odd cutscenes that don't explain the most important things, and lack of cutscenes where there was clearly a place for them. And the game ends in a very unsatisfying way with a sequel bait that never came to be. This game is a harder sell for the modern audience than some of the classic examples of the genre that aged really well, but I still think that Alone in the Dark New Nightmare is worth playing. Which version to play is a bit of a tough choice, as the arguably best version of the game is on Dreamcast and it's not exactly the most popular classic platform to own, while the emulation of it is still not perfect. If you do grab the game from GOG, be aware that it has issues, and PC version also, for whatever reason, made each save item you pick give you 5 instead. But if you can try it out, you might as well. And while I don't expect this timeline of Alone in the Dark to be revisited, even if the new remake of the original game is successful, I hope that it might be someday anyway, as it had a lot of potential.